Hello, and a warm welcome to the Irish Angle, our weekly show, looking back at all the big issues and talking points within the industry. Not a huge amount to talk about this week, but we'll have a chat anyway. I've Emma and Johnny here, and we'll go through everything. Hi, guys.
Hey,
That's not
Vincent.
how you start a show, Vinny. It's going to be a riveting chat. We've loads to talk about.
Loads to talk about. Right, you are, Johnny. All right, we'll start off. First thing is that the weather did break in time for us last weekend, so we did get to see some good jump racing at Fairyhouse and Punchestown. What I thought was interesting here is we know we had the big freeze last week, but during the week we had a show on Wednesday, and before we went on air, I looked up Met Air and to see what they were saying about the weather and the prospects for both Fairyhouse and Punchestown. And what I thought was interesting was they had given the temperatures to rise, but they were talking by the time Punchestown was on at midday on Sunday, they were talking about the temperature being up to as much as 9 degrees. Yesterday, I was driving the car at exactly midday yesterday, and what was the temperature in the car? 9 degrees. That's some forecasting, isn't it? If we could only do the same with the horses, we'd be right, Emma, wouldn't we?
Yeah, actually, there was some swing in the temperatures, and it was tough going for anyone looking after horses in the last week as well. Like even like the cards for Fairyhouse and Punchestown, we did a form scan show on Friday, and like I was kind of pessimistic that anything would even be on at that stage. But yeah, and even like the fields, I thought there might have been smaller fields, like considering frozen gallops and stuff like that. But yeah, it all swung around, thank God. I think it was like -6 or -7 here during the week, and back up to 9 or 10 degrees this week. It's kind of hard to believe it, but thankfully there wasn't too much disruption to the race anyway.
All right, just looking back at the weekend and the racing that we did have, the big one, the big talking horse was Salvator Mundi in the Moscow Flyer. What did you make of that performance, Emma?
Look, I suppose all the hype was building up to him on the lead up to, like, obviously he had there's plenty of chat about him before he ran the Triumph last year. I think he did run in the same race as Sergino in OT, and Nicky and Willie obviously bought the two of them, the first two out of the race for the same owner. So maybe a bit of competition there to see who picked the better one. But he ran the Triumph last year naturally and ran okay, I suppose. But obviously won in Tipperary then in a bit of a no contest, and like he was and still is favourite for the Supreme before the Moscow Flyer, and like Willie normally sends a good one there. People were knocking him an awful lot in the performance. To be honest, I wouldn't be as negative as some people were being. Obviously, he pulled really, really hard. People were knocking his jumping. I don't know. I just think it was because he was pulling so hard and just wasn't able to get a chance to kind of leave himself go and jump up. Paul was trying to get him cover and stuff. And like he picked up well turning in. Whether he deserves to be favourite for the Supreme, like, have we seen much that's that much more impressive? Like, I suppose Romeo Coolio is the obvious one, but like he was beaten by Toon Salvator and a Royal Bond as well. I don't think it was a bad field in the Moscow Flyer. Like a lot of the time, it can be a bit of a Willie Mullins show. But Henry had a good horse in there. Skylord maybe just didn't see the race out. Kellis another one for Willie in there, ran a nice race, I think. So I wouldn't be maybe as negative on Salvator Mundi. Probably a bit of talk about this tongue tie he had on as well. I think Patrick was saying he might be better on better ground. Look, I think watching the Tipperary race is probably where people were, he was like a hurdler in front of the rest of the field, but like that was no contest whatsoever. They're talking about going straight to Cheltenham. Like I'd like to see him run again now before we backing him for a Supreme or anything like that. But I'm not as cold as plenty of people were after the race tonight.
Yeah, the fact you talk about him pulling very hard. I see he wears a hood. He's worn a hood all times. He's run for Willie Mullins in the 3 starts, and he's a tongue strap on as well. Yesterday too, so he obviously has a few issues. Johnny, what would you think of him?
Yeah, it was a thought-provoking race. I think this is why we love racing. If you had a Cheltenham preview night and Salvator Mundi didn't run between now and Cheltenham, he's Supreme favourite. You'd have such a split in terms of backing him and opposing him. A couple of things I want to say just about Punchestown. A bookmaker got on to me maybe a couple of months ago about the tote, going on about guaranteeing. The tote guarantees the prices for guarantees the SP, but if you back name the first race, you were paid your 33 to 1. If you backed in the place, you were paid €3.40 on a 33 to 1 shot. So I do think that needs to be pointed out, that if the total is guaranteeing the win part of a bet, it can completely skew the place part. If you back in 8th place in the first race yesterday, you got paid 12 to 5 on a 33 to 1 shot to play. So that was one thing. As for the race in itself, then Salvator Mundi, this was a race for me in that the market was always going to be a little bit volatile. And again, it's kind of insider information because there's no way you can back Salvator Mundi into 8-15 unless you've some idea what he's doing at home. He was beaten 17 lengths the Triumph Hurdle. He won a Negan Spoon maiden hurdle, whereas stablemate Kellistror was good at Cork. But there was clearly an implication that somebody from Willie Mullins knew. Kellistror was sent off 7-2. This lad was sent off 8-15. That's like there's no contest there in the betting. That this guy is obviously good. Now, there's a broader point here that there's a suggestion certainly going around that he had a wind operation, but because we don't have that in Ireland, we're kind of left to figure it out, and we have to ask connections if that were the case. He did wear a tongue strap on for the first time, and it was such a, as I say, a thought-provoking performance, Vinny, because he did an awful lot wrong. Like I don't really watch races in running anymore, but I was kind of thinking, like, if you back this horse, are you happy at any stage of the race until that turn of foot he showed from the turn into the straight, which I thought was quite extraordinary, really, because he did so much wrong. And Paul Townend was saying afterwards that we know he can jump, but he felt that the race was kind of messy and it was run at a sort of a sluggish enough pace, even though I didn't feel that Skylord ever looked like he could be going much faster, and he's not a bad horse. The way he came up around the bend, I mean, pushed along early straight, right? I was looking at Paul Townend. I thought it was another really good ride from Paul because the horse was doing so much wrong, and he was keen as well. And his jumping was, I'd say, about 3 or 4 out of 10, if you want to be honest. And then he just kind of swooped on by like Kellistror, who maybe was a little bit unlucky in the run, but the engine is certainly there. And, you know, people were probably hyping this horse up a bit on the Sergino form. And he was backed. We spoke last week that in early January, there was a 10-1 the Field Supreme, which I never remember in my lifetime. And that all changed, and he was nearly half those odds going into the race kind of on Sunday. But funnily enough, his odds didn't overly change afterwards, which I think is fair enough as well. But I'd be surprised, and this is a visual impression, I'd be surprised if there were any horse with that cruising, with that sort of change of gear that he had coming into the straight for a squeeze, because that for me separates him from the mortals of the likes of Relieved Duties, Kellistror and Skylord. They're good horses, all good maiden hurdle winners of late. Really good, solid form for into race and potential. And imagine if like the turn of foot he showed for me was quite something. You're either with him or against him, sort of, I suppose. I'd be with him for the Supreme after that performance, because obviously he needs to jump better, but he's a hell of an engine.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, one of the things there you touched on was the fact that there's talk about he had a wind operation since he ran in May. So if he ran in the UK, that would have to be declared when the horse is declared. We would have it on irishracing.com, and so would all the other major racing sites, showing that the horse had a wind operation, which is a significant thing for a punter to know. But we don't get that in Ireland. What do you think of that, Emma? Now, we know that it's not a foolproof system in the UK, because they just put them all down as wind surgery, when in fact there are lots of different operations and procedures that can go on. Some are more invasive than others and would suggest a bigger issue the horse had with its wind, depending on the different procedure that was done, but they don't break them down in that way.
Yeah, look, I suppose I kind of have split opinions on this. Like, I think if you're going to give the information to punters, you have to go the whole hog, and, you know, maybe, can you specify what kind of wind operation? Because, like, look, I'm no veterinary expert, but like, there's definitely different levels of extremity when it comes to wind operations. Like, if they're going to tell a punter the horse had a wind operation, like, should they be specifying it's a hob day, you know, it's a soft palate cauterization? Because, like, just looking at those two surgeries, for example, like a soft palate cauterization is quite an uninvasive surgery, I suppose. Like, a horse can be back in gentle exercise pretty much, you know, a couple of days afterwards, back in the normal routine within a number of weeks. Whereas if a horse is hob dayed, like, they're on box rest for 4 to 6 weeks, like, it's obviously a way bigger deal. So, you know, like, seeing first time wind up on a race card, like, can mean a lot of different things. So, like, I find it hard to kind of judge it myself. And, like, are you going to back a horse first time or second time after a wind up? Like, if you're going to do it, should you be doing it right and giving the punters the whole information on it? Like, maybe you'll say, look, punters mightn't, you know, some people reading the race card might find it too confusing, but, like, you'd imagine a lot of people would like to know a lot more about what the horse actually had done. So that's kind of my opinion. Like, having just a wind up on the card is a bit too simplistic, I think, to get a real general view on it. And look, I wouldn't really be against bringing it in Ireland. I'm not really sure why it's not here at the moment. Obviously, it came in the UK a while ago, and most people seem to think that we should be doing it here as well. So you'd imagine that the IHR, BHR are going to follow in that route at some stage, but when it's going to come in here, I'm not sure.
It should totally happen. Like, let's be honest here. Like, when you're looking at racing, and racing is I mean, under scrutiny in terms of, you know, the loss of turnover and all of this. And we're in a situation where, and we'll talk maybe about prize money at the DRF and all that. We're at a situation where we need people, newcomers, betting on racing, and we're we're kind of in an age now where newcomers to the sport, like a lot of them will kind of be au fait with technology and mobile phones and all that, and like the data available that isn't available for racing, like we were really we're in the dark ages on this. Like a wind up, why would you not show? Why would you not have? And you're absolutely right, Emma. The different levels of wind up. Why, like, if a horse has had a wind operation, that absolutely will affect my kind of view on the race. And it will also, if I see a certain stallion, for example, if I see a load of his progeny seem to have wind ups, that's data that I actually want to know. If I want to send my mare to that stallion, for example, and you'll often have rumors about certain stallions in the past that their horses are bad at their wind. We need to know more about this. We need to know more. We need to have more information. And when I took up cycling during lockdown, and I started going on Strava, and just by having like a little thing on my wrist or having it on the bike, the data is almost like more enjoyable looking back on it than the memories of the cycle itself. And the data you could have for horse racing in terms of what was the top speed in the race, how much distance did that jockey cover on that particular day, all of this stuff could be amazing. We could also have what weight was the horse, literally weigh every horse before a race to see what weight he is. Why is he 50 kilos less this day compared to the rest? Why was he 50 kilos more than the horse that was beside him? That sort of stuff. Like, there's so much data, and I feel that we are in the dark age. Like, why can we not at least have wind ups? Like, and I don't care if people don't want them; they should be there. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, it's a funny one. It's not in Ireland and it is in the UK, considering it's such a major talking point. All right, moving on. Loads of other things from the race at the weekend. We'd JJ Slevin, first winner for Willie Mullins. Gave it some ride as well. Mr. Giff. What did you make of that, Emma? He finally got one of Willie's.
It was a good performance. I think he was saying in the interview afterwards it was only his second ride for Willie. I think he had ridden in a grade 1 or something when Willie had a load of honours. But and I just thought it was interesting as well coming back in. I think Kevin O'Ryan pulled him over, and JJ said straight away, like, this is a big deal. Like, I was actually nervous coming out here, and that's kind of refreshing to hear nearly from a jockey. Like, because most of the time they'll just kind of say it's another day at the office. But we were kind of discussing this last week about the Simon Muneer job. How big a deal is it? But like, if you can get on the likes of these horses, even behind Paul Townend, and JJ definitely showcased himself to the best. It was a brilliant ride, but like, you maybe wonder, Asian Master, did he hit a few fences, Tully Hill, but like that Majbur form now, is it looking a little bit rocky after that, do you think?
Yeah, well, just on that, I wouldn't be too worried about that, Emma, because Tully Hill, I tipped up Asian Master on Friday because I think he was 5-2-11-4. I said, like, he can't be that price relative to Tully Hill based on the run the last day when there's Friday between them. I thought Asian Master was actually disappointing. I thought, like you're saying, his jumping wasn't great. Tully Hill, again, he's a little bit out to his left. But what was great about this race was Willie Mullins trained the first 4. You go back Mr. Giff in the morning at 7 or 8 to 1. And you obviously went off 7-2, but all of the horses were basically trying for their life. And as much as people will knock one trainer having all these horses, it was a really fascinating race to watch. And just watching JJ, who, like, you could have backed the horse. I don't know what he went and run. He probably went big enough because people were wondering, like, is he too far off the pace? It's a lovely, lovely, beautiful kind of calm ride from him. And as you say, this we spoke about this last week, but that influence. You had 4 different owners here for Willie, and the owner's horse. I think obviously his first winner for Willie. The whole dynamic of how to work out JJ riding for Willie, but I thought in terms of advertising his quality as a rider, this was well up there.
Yeah, and I think even in the interview afterwards, he was saying how he watched back all these races, and he was saying that this horse only had like one swift turn of foot. I think he'd like go for a furlong, like, and like just like people maybe underestimate maybe the work that jockeys put in, like before a race, like watching back all of the races this horse has run and kind of trying to get the best out of him. And it obviously worked to a T, because like going around, you kind of say it was between the first few, but JJ came with a swift run, kind of like he said he still need to do, and it worked out well.
If you can get a lift to the races, then I don't know if JJ has a chauffeur, but if you can get a lift to the races, I'd say you gotta spend some time watching back videos.
Yeah. Well, you talk about there Willie having the first 4 in contention in a race. We also had a 1-2-3 for Gavin Cromwell on the day as well, in the Dan and John Moore Memorial Chase. Big day for Gavin Cromwell. What, he 4 winners on the card? He had another one at Punchestown on Sunday. He's flying. But on the other side of that, the flip side of it, is Henry de Bromhead, who was flying at Christmas. We talked about this in the show we had last week. He hasn't had a winner this year. 0 from 22 runners so far. Would you be worried, Johnny?
Yeah, like it's it was pointed out to me, my mate Dan McDonald, I actually do a football podcast with him, and he was pointing out to me before the big meet at Naas, he was a little bit worried about the Bromhead form. It had kind of gone over my head a bit at that stage, but that day then in the Mayor's Chase, Henry had two well-fancied horses, and they both were very disappointing. Then I started to take maybe a little bit more notice of it, and he has, there might be a small question mark. I'm just looking at the stats towards the end of last season here now, so just bear with me. I know that Henry had sort of half gone into the December, kind of into the end of the year. He'd gone into it in slightly sort of underwhelming form as well. So his stats were, he was 9 from 92 in December, which 10% would be way below Henry. Now, sometimes stats can kind of skew you, like he might have had a lot of play starts and that, but like going into the actual Christmas period, I think he was way down on numbers, winners going into the Christmas period. And then Christmas, like he'd some very good, the Big Western, some very good performances. But like not from 20 and no winners in the flat in January would be slightly unusual. I mean, it's not that long ago we're talking about Willie Mullins kind of blip in form over the Christmas. So I'm sure Henry won't be getting too stressed about it. But Gavin Cromwell, you sort of spoke about this in your blog a bit, Vinny, as well. The trainers at the top and the HRI plan to restrict how many horses they could run in certain races and all that. But Gavin Cromwell he's become an exceptional trainer. Like he had a winner in Bahrain the other day as well, and he's able to kind of burn the candle both ends. Very, very very hungry, I think, for more. Like people often speak about Gordon Elliott, the drive he has and how driven he is. I did a piece with Noel Moran and he was on about that lately, that the drive that, I tell you, if you meet Gavin, like Gavin is a gentleman, but having bought the field beside him for a lot of money, you can imagine prime real estate in County Meath, so that he could install another gallop. And from him being a farrier who trained the odd horse, I feel there's a big story in Gavin down the line in terms of the winners that he's going to have. And that Dan and Joan Moore, as much as it looks an impossible race to me anyway beforehand, to have the 1, 2, 3 and it was absolutely off the charts. I couldn't believe it afterwards. And 2 winners for the Inbound Syndicate as well. They've moved their horses there in recent months over the weekend. So he's brilliant trainer. And just from I have often many laments about having horses with different trainers and that, but he was brilliant to deal with, brilliant to deal with. And I had a lot of duds with him, but even if he was running, and he'd be very honest as well, if the horse is no good, that's it, just move the horse on. He's very, very good to deal with, and I'm delighted he's doing well. He's a big force, Gavin, going forward, I think.
Yeah, we're just talking about that. You touched on the blog I wrote this week. I was looking at the Dublin Racing Festival. We had the preliminary entries for the 8 Grade 1 races came out last week. 118 entries in total. 47 of them are Willie Mullins. 32 are Gordon Elliott. There's just 6 from Henry de Bromhead and only 3 from Gavin Cromwell. So there is a big divide even between the top 4, as we talk about there. But just overall, looking at it, that last year at the Dublin Racing Festival, Willie Mullins won all 8 Grade 1 races. There were no UK-based runners in any of the 8 Grade 1s. There were only 3 UK trainers came over and had runners at the meeting. They were all in handicaps. Is it a bit of a worry for that Dublin Racing Festival, Emma? We know it's been a huge success, sellout last year. It's going to be ticket only this year. But they're very dependent on just those 2 trainers, aren't they? Willie Mullins particularly, but also Gordon Elliott. Without their runners, it doesn't happen, does it?
Great. I suppose it's kind of a general theme, and at the top end of national hunt racing, like Cheltenham, like take out Willie Mullins' horse out of the Cheltenham. What's it going to be then as well, I suppose? But yeah, look, he won all the Grade 1s last year. I think. Look, Dublin Racing Festival, I think it's a brilliant festival. Like you see some of the biggest clashes of the Irish horses, but you'd be disappointed that there wasn't more kind of high-end entries, at least from the UK trainers. Like these are. I saw people maybe complaining about prize money in Ireland. Like some of the prize money for graded races is way down, but like these races at the Dublin Racing Festival, like they're €150,000, €200,000 plus Grade 1s. Like you'd imagine, they throw their hat in the ring at least anyway at this stage of it, which is disappointing. And you'd wonder, maybe are we doing enough to attract them over? I don't know. Like your blog was interesting. Like Fergal O'Brien, the only one of the top 15 with an entry at this stage. Like it's. Maybe the handicaps will read a bit more, but like you'd be surprised, like how the likes of a Dan Skelton or Nicky Henderson or Paul Nichols have nothing to even enter here. Look, maybe they're saying it's a bit too close to be travelling horses over to Ireland, but I don't know. It's definitely disappointing, and I think like it does add to the occasion. Like thinking back on memorable occasions on Irish racetracks, like Tidal Bay winning the Lexus, like when Sprinter Sacker came to Punchestown. Like, it's something that racegoers love to see, and it's a pity because like we see the British racegoers coming in their shows. I'm not sure what the exact stats are but I think last year, like, there was a massive proportion of that DRF crowd came from the UK. So maybe it takes away from the event a bit, but look, it's still a cracking festival, I suppose.
It seems a bit odd, Vinny, that like you look at if you say the English trainers don't have an affinity with this meeting per se, but the Irish owners who've horses in Britain, like JP and Joe Donnelly, like, could they not say, like, I want runners at this meeting? You know, you think of the really good horses that Nicky Henderson has trained by that pair alone. And Emma's right, like, prize money in Ireland is really, really bad, if you ask me, at the moment, and they are trying to address the graded anomalies HRI is trying to address, but prize money is a serious problem. And by the way, read the article in the Racing Post today. BHA chair sounds alarm after being ensnared by gambling checks. You actually can't make up how difficult it is for people to have bets in Britain. This will directly influence a racecourse over here, how much money they have, and the money that's being wagered is absolutely tied in with prize money. And I actually think Irish racing has its head in the sand about how alarming these developments are in Britain, where affordability checks and everything else are cutting massive influence in terms of people not betting enough. But our prize money is not great. But as Emma says, it's actually good for this meeting. And why the Irish owners can't get their trainers to send the horse over here is disappointing, because it's a massive boost for me. The English racegoer wants to come, definitely, but we need English horses at this meeting as well.
Yeah. You talk about prize money there, and yes, it is big for the Dublin Racing Festival. Obviously, they pushed a lot of money into that. But you look at the likes of that Moscow Flyer we saw in Punchestown yesterday with Salvator Mundi. He won 22.5 grand for winning that Grade 2. 16 years ago, the winner of that race got 29 grand. So, like, you wonder what has really happened. Now, I know they're talking about addressing it this year for some of those Grade 2s and Grade 3s, both on the flat and over jumps, but it's only bringing it back to the parity of 2020. We're not even getting back to where we were back in 2009.
Think, Vinny, I think HRI's kind of explanation about this, and bear in mind, like, our prize money, unlike Britain, is based on 50% of a government subvention, which if you have a particular government might just say, well, sure, what's this about, giving money to horses and wealthy owners and yada yada, even though I agree with the subvention. But HRI's response to this is that there's so much racing on now that they've essentially had to spread out the prize money to kind of cater for it. But it's like, if you look at some of the Galmoy hurdle, for example, race like that, you look at some of the Grade 2, Grade 3s listed races, flat and national, the prize money is terrible. Like, and even though our prize money is held up to 10 grand minimum at the bottom level, the Curragh obviously went over that to make it, I think, 20 grand minimum races. The 10 grand minimum races, if you own a horse that's a moderate horse and you're looking to win a race even for 6 grand, you won't be long, even if you're winning races, to figure out this doesn't add up. And most horses obviously don't win. So the prize money is a massive problem, I think, going forward.
Yeah, we also have HRI in their recent 5-year plan they brought out at the beginning of last year. They're talking about increasing the number of fixtures by 10 or 15% over the next 5 years. So that's going to dilute the prize money even more, you'd imagine, depending on what's coming in, of course, from the gambling revenue they get through media rights. But anyway, we'll talk about that again. A couple of other things from last week. We've gone through most of the racing anyway, but Ron McKnight, journalist from the North, from the Belfast Telegraph, sadly passed away. And I see that the jockeys wore black armbands in Punchestown. David Casey's dad passed away too. So sad times for both of those families. Johnny, Ron McKnight, you would have known him, would you?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be fairly regularly in the past few years at Downpatrick, and to a lesser extent Down Royal. I used to do kind of bits for Down Royal on their big day. But Ron was, the Northern Circuit, you get different kind of journalists that you would not see coming down. They do the two meetings up there. I suppose a couple of things, Vinny, like I was in, I got a lift to, I think it was like one of the yards kind of visits, maybe Gordon's or Willie's, or a year or two ago, from Philip Quinn, who's with the Mail now. But Philip was obviously with the Irish Independent for years, and he was talking about a time when that stable, the Irish Independent, Sunday Independence, and the Herald, I think, had 6 racing journalists, and it now has no full-time racing journalists. And the racing journalists across the print press have gone to almost nothing, and it's sad to see. And Ron McKnight was like a relic of that old era with the Belfast Telegraph. One thing I want to say about Ron is, like, I would literally only meet him at Down Royal and to an extent Downpatrick, but pretty much Royal, and as his health faded in recent years, he found it hard to go racing. But I hadn't been in touch with him maybe the last 6 weeks, 2 months, and I was very, very sad. I genuinely was very sad to hear the news yesterday. But Ron McKnight would absolutely have gone out of his way to encourage me with my work on racing TV and stuff like that. He'd send me really, really nice messages and what I could do and what I could improve on, stuff like that. He went out of his way to be nice to me, and that'll always stick with me, because we only met a few times, and more to the point that he was at home and was in some respects was terminally ill over the last year or two, and he still went out of his way to to send me messages and be very nice to me, and he was a lovely guy to deal with, and may he rest in peace.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, no, a very nice man. He was a big follower of our site, irishracing.com too. He used to email me regularly when he'd see something wrong or something needed changing. Wanted to know about his horse tracker account and how to add some other one into it and everything else. But anyway, nice guy, poor old Ron. He'll be missed. Last thing then, a horse to follow from the week. Emma, what took your eye? Anything in particular?
I suppose there wasn't a whole pile of racing. We hadn't touched on Nicky Watson. I thought he was actually quite impressive. He won the Grade 3 chase on Sunday in Punchestown, the same day as the Moscow Flyer. Like he was kind of an awkward enough horse over hurdles, I suppose. Like he used to wear the hood and he used to pull quite hard, but like he seems to have improved a fair bit for a fence. Like he won first time out in Ace, beat Slade Steel, a bit of an upset there. And he came back out then against Down Memory Lane. Like it was 2 mile 3, I think, on Sunday. Like you'd imagine he's a horse who probably wants even further than that. I think they were saying they couldn't stretch him out too far over hurdles because he was so keen. He was being so hard on himself. But kind of one race that would stick out in your head, like he ran in that novice hurdle in Navan that produced all the Cheltenham winners. Like he was behind Slade Steel that day, and Stellar Story and Better Days Ahead were behind him as well. Like he's obviously a horse of fair ability and maybe didn't show himself up to the best over hurdles, but he seems to have settled for a fence. His jumping's good. He made a bit of a mistake at the last in Punchestown, but you'd forgive him that, and he sprinted away from a horse who they think quite highly of Down Memory Lane. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's kind of one who'll get in the mix among the better staying novices over fences this year.
Very good, yeah. I'll give another Willie Mullins horse while I'm there. Quelle Histoire, which finished second to Salvator Mundi, stable companion in the Moscow Flyer. I thought that horse was a bit unlucky. Bumper winner in France, bought for 200k, won his maiden hurdle. I think there's a day in him, another big day in him somewhere. I think he'll be a graded horse. There's no question about it. He got a bit hampered in the straight, stayed on really well to just get up for second on the line. So he'd be one for me to stick in the notebook. Johnny, can you give us another Willie Mullins one, or did you see something else?
No, fucking Willie's winning everything and Gavin Cromwell's winning everything. So we're gonna Gordon Elliott's win if they're not, and Henry Winnie's back in form. So we're gonna go with Declan Queally here. I tipped up Back and Alien on the Racing TV website for Saturday, and like I kind of made it a match between Back and Alien and the favourite, who was Windrock, wasn't it? Windrock scratched on account of the ground. Willie'd actually won the race with Blood Destiny and Miss Manzer in recent years. This was the juvenile hurdle. Whatever it is about juvenile hurdle in that division, I actually really like it. I've always, even the Fred Winter is one race. I think I backed the winner, the Fred Winter, the first year, and Dabaru Nina rode it for Paul Nolan. This is getting the trumpet out now. This is about 17, 18 years ago. But I've always liked, it's probably the one race they've introduced at Cheltenham that I happily think they could, because the Fred Winter has a 4-year-old handicap. It has like, there's a lot of plotting going on in it. The standard of the race actually come down a bit in recent years. You can get in with the horse maybe that like you wouldn't have gotten in with in the past. But Back in Alien, like he went off 4 to 5 now. If you were at the course, you'd be like, how is this horse going out 4 to 5? It literally looked a 2-horse race and the other horse wasn't running. He went from 8:15 to 4 to 5. He's just a lovely way of going, this horse. He's by Sayuni. Sean O'Keefe rode him for Declan Queally, and I always looked in complete control. He's still kind of learning on the job, but what kind of prompted me to look at him was he's run the last day at Limerick prior to that when he was second to Out for a Stroll. He was so strong at the finish of the race, really strong from a hopeless position turning in. I think he's 33s for the Fred Winter at the moment, just looking around there. I'd be very interested to see where he goes. I feel there's a lot more to come from this horse. He wore headgear, didn't he, on Saturday? I think he wore cheek pieces, which maybe would suggest that he's kind of like he can be a little bit lazy or whatever at times. But he's a horse going forward. I think he could be very interesting. The Fred Winter. It'd be great to see that yard have a runner as well at the festival.
Good stuff. So it's not all just about the top yards. Anyway, If you're watching the racing this week, there's some good racing in Windsor on Friday. 11 Irish horses entered and big money at stake. I think there's a couple of £100,000 races there, which is why there's the Irish interest in it. So do gamble responsibly if you're having a bet this week, and make sure to subscribe to our channel.
One more thing, Vinny, sorry.
So what, Johnny?
One more thing, sorry. Two things. I'm going to be like the lad who just won't leave the pub here. But back in Alien, actually, this is, I don't know how I missed this. He actually wears a hood. Now, that's kind of an odd one because like he doesn't really race at the moment, like a kind of a free running type, but he wears a hood, which is quite interesting. Because on the flat he was maybe a mile and 2 horse, but it'd be interesting to see what they do with headgear with him going forward. But I was on to Gavin Cromwell, and he plans to run, I think, 3 horses at Windsor. I just meant to bring that in. So great to have Jones racing back at Windsor, and Gavin has been brilliantly successful in raiding over the last year or two. Not so much maybe this season so far, but planning to run 3 horses, he said, in Windsor over the 2 days.
Excellent. There you are. Even more information for you. Right. We're off. We'll say goodbye. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.